Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Laurel Morris with Z Prime, and welcome back to another WE3Live Clean Tech Innovation Series episode. Today we have a riveting conversation with our special guest Neil Pendle and host Steve Arthur coming in from the UK, and they're diving into disrupting the UK contestable water market. So please feel free to type in the chat, let us know where you are in the world, and ask any questions to the speakers today. So it's now my pleasure to hand the mic over to Steve.
Thank you, Laurel, and thank you for all being with us for this WE3 session today, wherever you're joining us from. I'm delighted that we're continuing to expand our reach and bring you guests from across the world as well. But first, I'd just like to say a quick thank you to our partners at Z Prime for making these sessions as successful as they've become over the last few years. So thank you, Laurel, Jason, and the team. And just a reminder that you can catch up on all the previous WE3 discussions, and there were some fantastic sessions here on the archive online and WE3 Clean Tech. Now, one of the things I've noticed is that whether we're talking to policymakers, regulators, leaders of major utilities, or other thought leaders from across sectors, the key theme is always for these sessions: how can we best address the challenges at hand around the environment whilst enabling and empowering customers, citizens, and organisations to thrive? So with that, I'm delighted to be joined by Neil Pendle today. Neil is Managing Director of WaterScan here in the UK. Hi, Neil. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thanks, Steve. Nice to speak to you.
It's great to have you here. Now, I've known and worked with Neil and his team for many years now, through the early days of the non-household water market, the retail market in England. And if there's someone who best characterises the blending of a no-nonsense business sense, a strong drive to address sustainability issues, coupled with an appetite to disrupt and challenge markets, then it's Neil. As for WaterScan, the company that he leads, they deliver a wide range of water management services, helping their industrial and commercial clients address water risk and security issues, implementing innovative water stewardship solutions, and being a driving force in the English water retail market. Now, WaterScan empower organisations such as British Telecom, Coca-Cola, John Lewis Partnership, and others to benefit from the retail market through being able to act as their own retailer, a concept called Selfsupply, which Neil, I'm sure, will come on to. Neil's team have been instrumental in helping to shape the design of this market and are recognised as challengers and disruptors in this space. They've really helped ensure a strong focus on the market operating efficiently, smart governance, and a focused pragmatism in actually getting things done. On top of this, WaterScan have a refreshingly clear sense of purpose, built around creating a sustainable water future. So if you follow them on social media or get a chance to hear Neil or his amazing team speaking at events, this drive and this passion and this sense of purpose comes through in abundance. Now, on to Neil himself. Neil has been at the forefront of water efficiency and championing customers in the water sector for nearly 30 years now. He's expertly led WaterScan from a startup business in '94, the early days of the privatised water sector in England, to them being the largest water management consultancy in the UK and the first new entrant in the English water retail market. Neil has also been a champion of water recycling and has been instrumental in bringing grey water recovery methods to the hotel markets in UK, Middle East, and North African regions. So fantastic background there, Neil. It's great to have you on board. Maybe should we start with how things are with you and your team and your customers at the moment as we emerge tentatively and hopefully from these unique times?
Well, lockdown's been a really challenging period for customers and for staff, but we've coped really well. We've found a strong recovery pathway. We're helping our customers develop solutions through the COVID period and through the recovery, the post-recovery. So it's been difficult, it's been hard, but we've managed to grow. Our customers are in good shape, but it's not been easy to do business. It's not been easy to develop some of the themes, and a lot of programs have got stalled. I think going forward, this is an unprecedented event, but I think it's made us more resilient as a result of it. So I think there's some good news coming out of this as well.
Do you think that, we saw an awful lot of interventions during COVID? with all of the terrible impact of COVID, do you actually think it caused us to actually be a bit more fleet of foot and maybe more comfortable with quick and agile disruption?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the regulator in the UK, Ofwat, they did a really good job of bringing people together, and I was amazed to see people make really quick decisions, come together actually to agree some common ground, which in a competitive market is not always easy to do, and actually deliver those solutions through to customers. So the interventions that happened both from a regulatory perspective, but also from trading parties and how businesses collaborated to help end users was really very refreshing indeed. And I think the sector in the UK and indeed the challenges across the planet on the water sector have been tremendous, but I think they've really risen to the challenge as well.
I wonder, Neil, so we saw a lot of comfort, I guess, or driven by necessity to make some of these changes. Have some of the companies that you work with, do you think you've seen them have that same sense of sort of speed and agility to adapt to different times?
Well, I think all business, we cover a wide range of sectors, from hospitality to food and drink manufacturing to service businesses, communication businesses. So they've all had their challenges. I think the difficult thing for them to adjust to is the fact that bandwidth is far reduced. So they didn't have time to really think about their long-term strategic programs, and a lot of stuff just got stopped. Because they were just dealing with the critical systems that they needed to do to survive. And there was a lot of shutting down of programs. We actually kept going on all our programs with our water efficiency works and our water strategy projects with our customers, simply because we couldn't really stop. We were on a pathway and we couldn't afford to take an 18-month pause. So we doubled up on the amount of site activities we did, the amount of work we did on some of our software programming. We're just about to launch a new software update in early 2022. So we just used the time well and to support our customers and help them so that when they can actually come out of this and begin to trade as they are now, then we're able to support them far better than we were before the crisis.
So, Neil, I hope I did you and WaterScan justice in my introduction. It'd be great if maybe you could give us a little bit of a flavour of what next for you and the organisation. Where do you see the near-term future for WaterScan and the sector that you work in?
Well, we're very fortunate through the period to have grown both revenues and profits through the COVID period. We gained customer share, market share in that period as well. And we've actually launched a couple of new options for customers in that time as well. So mainly in response to customers who were really struggling with their existing suppliers, and we were able to offer solutions really quite quickly. So it's been really hard, but we actually have come through that. And I think the things that we're really focusing on now are those sustainability issues. So the ESG programs, the corporate responsibility programs, and really the disclosure. We're really interested in water disclosure programs to match the carbon disclosure that most corporate businesses operate. We're trying to make sure that they also call out their water consumption, not only from a carbon perspective, but also from a resource management perspective.
Yeah. So with some of the specific challenges that we've seen in the water market during and beyond COVID, how have WaterScan, how are you guys looking to help address some of those challenges specifically?
Well, there's been, aside from the obvious operational challenges, businesses being closed, no customers coming through the door. So the two things we found most difficult is a disconnection with customers. So the Zoom and Teams environments are not conducive to close collaboration. It's really quite hard in quite a lot of respects. And quite often it's just dealing with the very important and nothing else gets done. And so you have to try to preempt and try to predict what a customer is going to need and still be working in the background. So when things start again, you're not just prepared, you're ahead of the game. And we've been reasonably successful in doing that. The second thing is the adaptation point. I think, we've learned to adapt very well. We've devised solutions and implemented them really quickly. And that's been very important for customers dealing with crisis. So we had two examples in lockdown for our hospitality customers. they were left with a lot of stranded beer. So effectively beer in kegs, what do you do with it? You can't get it out of the cellar. You definitely can't pour it down the drain. So how do we dispose of it? And that type of thing, we were able to actually collaborate with water companies, with other partners, with the regulator, and really strip out some of the administration and get a really good result for the environment, get a good result for the suppliers, but also get a good result for customers. And I guess the second thing is the data sharing piece. I think we've seen sort of the sector, water sector in the UK. I wouldn't call it particularly tech savvy, and I'm being polite, Steve. You as a lifer in the water industry knows that technology and water don't often mix. And I think there's been a sea change in this. We've certainly seen the data sharing requests that we've had both with environment agencies and wholesalers. It's been much improved over this period. So people have had an opportunity to look at how they share data and what data they've got in order to reinforce those messaging that water is not an infinite resource, and it is a precious one, and we need to build a more sustainable, resilient future for water.
And is that frustration that you feel that sort of echoes more broadly? It's, you know, we talk about technology in the water sector, that it's taken an event or taken a period of time as dramatic as we've had over the last couple of years to really bring home how important collaboration and the role that technology has got. Much like if you think in the mid-1800s and some of the challenges that we were seeing in London that drove some of the huge Victorian infrastructure that went in place, but it wasn't until problems were directly in front of politicians in that case that we saw that. Do you think this is sort of analogous with that pivot point?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things going on here. I think it's already starting. We've seen a lot of companies look at their data and sort of feel a bit differently about it. It certainly was a sort of an aid to reporting, and actually it's far more valuable than that. And I think what they missed was actually the customer element to this. So data is really important for a utility. It's really important for a retailer to understand what's going on and what people are using. It's even more important for the person who's using it. They need to know what they're using. They need to know how much it costs. And also they need to know what to do about it. And quite often we get this situation where actually I use this much water. Actually, they don't really know how much water that is. They know how much it costs. But we're trying to put more information in front of customers for them to make good, informed decisions. After all, you know, water coming through a tap might seem like something that's taken for granted, but actually, you know, certainly in my part of the world, the water companies extract it from reservoirs and aquifers which feed the rivers. And I kind of don't want to have a tap running if it's going to be at the expense of a river flowing. And I think that balance is what customers are really talking to us about. Particularly in this corporate sector, but I think it's a much wider piece than that. People are really interested in the environment, and they're not prepared to go on as business as usual. And using data in that way is very, very empowering.
That data that can be turned, as you say, into information, which can then be acted upon and provide a bit of knowledge to those customers and hopefully make them more empowered than just engaged with, which I know has been the sort of maybe the bent in previous times. I absolutely agree. Okay, Neil, so we've got a theme today of a broad theme around the role of disruption in actually ensuring that markets deliver. And I know that any conversation we have is going to go beyond markets, but just for this section, looking at sort of markets and how they deliver for customers, I wonder if we look at the role of various players in the market, policymakers, regulators, utilities, customers and communities, how do you think these stakeholders should better align to deliver the sort of outcomes that we need to see?
Well, I think in the first place that we have to accept that the market has forced players together. So whether they be regulators or trading parties or customer groups or environmental groups, actually, this is a space where it's kind of forced us to work together. And despite competing agendas and drivers, actually markets are really quite good at focusing on critical impacts and actually bringing people together with surprising speed. I think that what happens in these cases is that when you strip away some of the raw competitive elements, you get quite a lot of agreement. Now, sure, everyone wants to compete for the customer. Everyone wants to find the next piece of technology or the next piece of marketing that's really going to sweep the board. But actually, there's a lot people agree on. And that collaboration, I think, is being picked up more and more now. And actually forcing markets together like this, it makes that engagement and that collaboration so much more. And of course, what we need to make sure is that at the heart of this is not an internal discussion between regulators and industry bods and engineers. What we need to do is we need to turn outwards and talk to customers about what they're feeling, what they're thinking, but also what they're expecting from the future. And customers are usually pretty savvy. They know that it's going to cost some money. They kind of know that it's not going to happen very quickly, but they want to see people acting the right way. And they do like to see people, in my experience, working together. So I think those are the things that really pull out. And so just as an example for that, we deal quite extensively with an organisation called Water Resources East. Yep. So this is a part of England which is very resource poor. It just doesn't have the water resources that it does in other parts of the UK. Surprisingly, it doesn't rain a lot in the east of the country. And you might have seen the pictures of it rain. That's mainly in Wales. But where we are, it's actually reasonably dry. And actually, Water Resource East brings a huge number of organisations together, customer groups, as well as all the other ones you'd expect, and actually tries to safeguard a sustainable supply of water for Eastern England. And there are many other groups across the UK. It's a great example of bringing people together.
Neil, I wonder, you said something very interesting there about markets sometimes turning in on themselves and being a little bit insular looking. And do you think that's an area that's ripe for disruption? Because we can see markets or policymakers around markets get quite squeamish when things get quite tight. We're seeing electricity retailers, going to the wall at the moment because of some of the pressures on wholesale prices. Do you think that that's an area when markets need to hold their nerve and actually be more confident, more outward looking and open, whether it's data, or the governance structures, or just how transparent they need to be? And parties will fail, parties will succeed. That's some of the dynamics of markets.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things we've been involved in the water industry from an outsider perspective, looking specifically at water efficiency and sustainable water projects. That actually to be inside the industry for the first time I was amazed. I was amazed how little the customer came up in conversations. I was amazed at the self-interest in groups that were effectively regional monopolies. I don't know how you can be competitive in a regional monopoly and not collaborate very closely together with your colleagues. And actually, that was the piece that we really thought was wrong. And we tried to change that. And one of the ways we changed that was to say, actually, there's an opportunity for customers to come into this space and bring a different perspective. And that's where Selfsupply was born. So we said, you don't need to be a retailer. You can actually, for some organizations, it might be worthwhile actually getting and becoming a retailer yourself and supplying yourself. And in those circumstances, that's actually brought a fresh voice to this. And I think that's the bit. It's not really WaterScan changing things. It's actually opening a door to a customer and a room full of water company CEOs listening to Whitbread and to BT talk about the issues and their expectations. I think that's been a revelation. I'd also point out that the water industry does look very inwards. And I was at a conference, a CEO conference a couple of years ago, where a CEO of a major water company in England said that water's too cheap, and the trouble is customers don't know how hard our job is. I mean, that's just it's just not acceptable. And we'd hope that that sort of thinking is on the way out, and a new, more inclusive thinking is on the way in. And I think the benefits to the customers, up to the water companies, is absolutely massive. They just need to be brave, get out there, put themselves in front of customers, and actually listen to what's going on.
But Neil, you mentioned something then, and I kind of teased it briefly at the start of my introduction around this concept of self-supply. Now, some of our audience may not be that familiar with the sort of the setup and the structure of the English water retail market for businesses. Can you just explain how, when the vertically integrated water monopolies were separated into wholesale and independent retail functions, explain how self-supply and businesses could be their own retailer? How does that fit into the space?
Yeah, so it's really quite simple. I mean, they're not actually supplying the water and supplying the wastewater services. So broadly speaking, 90% of the activities are still undertaken by regional monopolies, by your water companies. Effectively, the retail element, the final 10%, is about four main activities. It's about answering the phone to customers. It's about paying your bill. It's about reading meters. And it's about collaborating with colleagues across the industry. And actually, when you think about that, if you're asking a business like Whitbread or Sainsbury's, actually, you don't need to worry about a bill or a meter reading because you're in control of that. What we really need you to do is stop doing the mundane and start doing the interesting. Now, when you put it in that context, and you then suggest that actually there's some savings as a result of doing it more efficiently than the retailer could, then it's a pretty compelling offering. So we simply cut out the middleman of the retailer and offer these companies, these businesses, access to the wholesalers directly to buy at wholesale rates through the market systems. And we cut out some of the, well, almost all of the administration of dealing with a retailer. And it means you've just got more time to look at sustainable water and those water strategy plans that people want to build and want to deliver.
And I know that from when that concept was brought in as the market was being designed, the success and how that's sort of flourishing and the role that you guys are playing in that has probably took some parties by surprise, which is why maybe some people see it as a bit disruptive, when actually I know some of your thinking is, look, you're just doing what the market's like to do, and you're trying to get the customers front and center, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't write the rules. I just looked at what the opportunities were when the rules were written. I mean, we were a retailer on the first day of the market. The first new entrant was WaterScan. Actually, the sort of number 2 new entrant was Green King, a pub operator and brewer, major brewer in the UK. And actually, they entered the market on the same day it opened as the first self-supplier. And it's just grown from there. But it isn't for everybody. And the main drivers aren't costs. The main drivers are actually sustainability and thinking about water in the long term. I mean, for a brewer, they kind of got to know there's going to be water there to actually produce product. And there's going to be pubs where they can sell their beer and offer facilities for their customers. And that sort of long-term thinking is really sort of the main driver behind the self-supply movement.
Thanks, Neil. So we've talked about markets, we've talked about the sort of role they have to play. Let's come on to technology, and not looking at in isolation, technology and innovative thinking. I'm interested in your thoughts on what do you think the role of new and emerging technologies are in disrupting utility provision, which I think we would probably agree has largely been asset-centric over the last 30 years or so. But maybe looking beyond technology as well, what are some of the mindset changes that you think need to be seen?
Yeah, well, I definitely think it's not about a black box. And I think that actually the thinking so far in innovation has been more about technology in terms of I've got a new system to help treat wastewater or a new pump and things like that. And actually it has a massive effect, but actually that should be business as usual. You should actually look for the best innovation every single day because that's what you're operating. To look at something genuinely new that's going to move the dial, I think you need to look a little bit further outside of that. And certainly what we found is the driver behind the sustainability and the climate change agenda has enabled people to look differently at data and service. And that customer service element is the most interesting thing that we're dealing with at the moment. The most interesting part of the market at the moment is how we deal with customers, how we get them great data so they're informed, they make good decisions, and actually bring them into the piece so that they can engage directly. So what that might be an app, that might be smart metering, that might be technology that gives them a track of price and consumption on a daily basis. It might be simply a report that arrives once a week or once a month. It's actually enabling that access to data and actually empowering them. That's the most interesting space. And we're just getting involved in this. So we think this is by far and away the best thing going on. And the innovation that's potential for this area is absolutely huge.
Okay, so if we've talked about the role of markets, we've talked about the role of maybe innovative thinking and not just putting it all against technology. You're working with some pretty large clients, some pretty large businesses. What do they tell you that they need going forward if they're going to sort of meet some of the challenges and hit that sweet spot that they need to keep growing their business, delighting their customers, but also you mentioned earlier about the environmental, social and governance priorities as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing people want, like companies, our business, our clients want simplicity. They want, they don't want to struggle for an answer. Actually, they just want the answer delivered and know that that answer is right. And that's why the focus on data is so important. But beyond that, those once you get that good data, you can focus your efforts elsewhere. So it may be that instead of sort of looking at the sort of spending a huge amount of time on reporting, you can look at possibilities for recycling water, for programs of grey water or rainwater harvesting. You might be able to look at other collaboration with partners and look at different ways of building. Certainly, we know from working with Sainsbury's is that they can reduce the water consumption in a superstore, in a supermarket, by 60% by putting in clean technologies into that building. And actually, most of the clean technologies are about not only measuring it, but actually informing the users, whether it be staff or customers, about the sorts of things that are happening with water on that particular site. That's the type of thing I think is most interesting. And I think that's what companies want us to do. As far as the ESG programs, it really is mostly about building plans for the future. And these are long-term plans, usually 3 to 5 year programs we run. And most of that is in around how we track consumption and consumption profiles and the actions of our customers and their customers. That's where most of the effort is. And so that might be involved in informing customers about the local water resource issues. It might be that we're looking at simply consumption details and how we can best use the water that we've got available to us. So there are plenty of other options that we can look at that become really interesting in that sort of ESG space. And I have to say, disclosure is the biggest one. So we're very keen on investor relations disclosure in the same way as carbon. And we've just launched a project with CDP, which has proved very useful to our customers in actually getting a platform for independent disclosure of their water consumption.
So building on that, can you tell us a little bit more about the carbon disclosure projects that you're working on? Because it's now that particularly interest a lot of people.
Yeah, so we partnered with them some 18 months ago. Relatively good timing, I suppose, in that we didn't get an inrush of people who wanted to do a lot of disclosure, but it enabled us to run it through our customers. So most of our self-supply customers, in one form or another, are disclosing their water consumption, and they have the track. The CDP method just means that it's independently verified, and we have a fixed methodology, and we produce those results independently so that they can be tested by the auditors at CDP. So it is simply an agreed way of reporting water. And once we agree that way, then we look back at a benchmark, a baseline period, and then we just track each year on year on year. And to begin with, it's quite a lot of work, but once you get into it, actually, it's really, really useful, and it brings up some surprising results. So we were seeing different areas and regions for the hotel group, Premier Inn, that we work with. And it turns out that actually the cleaning regimes in this particular region were very different from what they were in other regions. And it was simply that they were flushing the loo once when they finished cleaning instead of 4 times when they were doing a cleaning regime on the hotel. Now, you think that's really quite simple, and yet you're right, it is. There's nothing difficult about this. That's the power of data. That's the power of engagement.
I know you mentioned it earlier, Neil, but there's something very close to your heart, which is when we're talking about global problems, there's something I know that you believe in and that you guys think about, which is about bringing this to life and thinking locally and connecting people locally with their environment, with their resources. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this idea of think global. So think we've got an issue with climate change. We've got an issue with water resources and resilience, and this is a global problem. But actually, act local. I think that's it's very empowering for people, for customers, for the sites. It's very empowering for their customers in the local community and enables that collaboration. So actually, when you say you need to reduce water consumption, well, what does that actually mean? actually it means there's more water in the river, there's more water in the environment. Actually, you get healthy resources and a healthy water cycle. Actually, it means if you put less down the drain, then there's less pressure on those wastewater treatment plants, which means we don't pollute our seas as often. We don't pollute our rivers. I think these are the big issues that matter to local people, and actually far more than worrying about, you know, what the rainfall patterns are in North America. They're interested in whether their river's running, whether they can swim in the sea, whether the water's going to come out of the tap every time, whether it's going to flood. These are local issues, and actually if we focus like that, actually we get great results locally, and if everybody does that, we get great results globally. So we're definitely very keen on this go local approach, particularly when it comes to rivers, river health, and our seas and coastlines.
And do you think there's something in there, Neil, around the sort of ubiquity of water? It's quite an abstract concept. It comes out of your tap. People don't actually think where that water has come from locally. It could have come from near the river that they walk their dog along every morning. Is there something about actually making it more connected with people in their local environment? Maybe how things were before sort of industrial times?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, not only do we provide great data on how much water the sites use and how much it costs, we like to say where it comes from. And actually, we tell them this is where the water comes from, and this is the health of that particular resource. And we tell them where the water goes once it's treated. Did they know it's actually pumped at an outfall at Bognor Regis? I mean, these are the types of things I think it's important for people to understand and know, to feel connected. And that engagement, usually used through a technology or a platform or an app, or some sort of report that empowers, gives that information to that customer. That's the way to go, and we've had some fantastic results. So just in the first year of rolling out a program amongst the Premier Inn hotels, we've seen a 3% net reduction in consumption on the trial area simply by just engaging. No technology, nothing else, just think about water in a different way. Don't even ask them to reduce the amount of water consumption, water they use. Just tell them where it comes from. And funnily enough, they change their behavior.
That's fascinating, isn't it? And that's, I guess, comes back to the role that technology has to bring these things to life rather than separating people from the reality around them. Absolutely.
It's a free win.
Neil, it's always great talking to you. Our time is running away, so I'm going to close on one final question for you. I've managed to conjure up 30 minutes for you at the Conference of Parties, the COP26 meeting in Scotland next month. Okay, so you've got a platform in front of the leaders of the world for a short period of time, about the same amount of time that we've just had together, which I've really enjoyed. So thank you for joining us. What would your message be around the climate change that we're seeing? And the sort of theme that we've been talking around today about disruption and connection and empowerment?
Well, I think one of the things, I mean, there's obviously a focus on carbon. So the first thing to say is that, water is a big problem. I know it's in the COP, but, most people are talking about carbon. And actually, I would like them to talk about water and the fact that it is finite. And, with population growth and business growth, and it's becoming a scarce resource. And this is coming down the line. We need to do something about this. The second thing is actually, it's a huge problem, but if we break it down and we break it down together and we involve customers and users and consumers in this piece, everyone can do their piece. If everyone does their bit, actually the problem's much less. And I think that's the type of thing that I'd encourage people to do, to actually make sure that people know that you can fix it and that we can fix not only the planet, but actually the water we've got within it and in our region. That, I think, is the most important message I'd give across to them.
That's great. Well, let's see if I
hate to do it. I just have to say, I'm quite happy in my space, being irritating to regional monopolies and disrupting people. So that's far more my sweet spot.
Well, look, Nick, it's been absolutely great. We could talk for a lot longer than the time that we've had, but thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it. Some great food for thought for our audience and for other people as well. So, Neil, just close by saying a big thank you to you, and hope to speak soon.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, everyone.